Hello, fine crypto people. This is Sterlin Lujan with Cryptospace. We are here with Luke Stokes, and Luke is going to tell us a lot about cryptocurrency and what he's doing in the space. But before I get to that, guys, Luke has been a personal friend of mine. We've met in person in Acapulco. We've known each other for a long time. Luke has been in the cryptocurrency space since God said, "Let there be light." So he's basically as OG as you get in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. So I really want to start this conversation out by saying, "Hey, Luke, how are you doing, man? Give us a breakdown about what you're up to in the cryptocurrency ecosystem. How's life, man?"
Oh, Sterling, it's great to talk to you, man. Thanks so much for having me. I'm doing fantastic. It's funny because when I got in, I thought I was late, and other people describe, the early 2010, 2011ers. I came in as late as the beginning of 2013, but now it's funny, 8.5 years later, that does feel like a long time. I'm doing fantastic. I ran an e-commerce company for about 10 years, and I sold that in the beginning of 2018 so I could focus full time on cryptocurrency advising and consulting. Kind of got looped into a position since then as the managing director of the FIO protocol. We could talk a little bit about that. It's basically just trying to make crypto easier for everybody using crypto handles, human readable addresses instead of those big, long, confusing, crazy Bitcoin addresses that nobody can understand. And I love this space. I love for the same reason you do. It's a tool for freedom. It's a way to have nonviolent global consensus. It's a mechanism for our species to level up a little bit in so many different ways, from governance to control of our own store of value to just how we even think of history. The idea that we have this immutable presence now that we can store information. You and I both have been on the Steam and Hive blockchains, places where you can communicate with others in a non-censorable way. So it's an amazing space to be in. I'm super happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, brother, absolutely. And get this, Luke. I think one of the things about you and I is that we share a lot of the same values, not only philosophically, but in regards to the cryptocurrency ecosystem. One of my missions since day one has been to provide more utility for the cryptocurrency ecosystem, make cryptocurrency and blockchain tech more usable for the average person, to enable mass adoption so that more people are able to use this technology, because I think that's ultimately what we want. We want it to be viable economically. And still to this day, I still think the cryptocurrency ecosystem is behind the curve in terms of usability. Still, the Visa, MasterCard networks are way more usable than cryptocurrency. I mean, I guess, do you agree with that? And where do you see this ecosystem heading? Obviously, you're the one trying to fix these problems.
Yeah, I absolutely would agree to that. It's frankly quite discouraging at times, how difficult it is to use cryptocurrency. And I've felt that way for quite some time. So back in 2013, it was actually January. I think I spent about $50 and I got 2.5 Bitcoin. That was my first, exploration into the space. And back then, I think there's still a Bitcoin wiki entry for FoxyCart. That was the e-commerce company my buddy and I started. And back then we were trying to onboard people to cryptocurrency. And we had eventually had thousands of stores, but none of them really cared to add a Bitcoin payment option to their checkout. It's too confusing. It created cart abandonments, and their checkout conversion rates were being affected because it was just people like, what is this Bitcoin thing? Do I need to go research this? What is this all about? And just too difficult, too confusing. And I felt that way for quite some time. I was excited about different projects like the Hive blockchain, previously called the Steam blockchain, because it had human readable addresses. At the same time, I was eventually became a block producer there, or a witness, or a validator, whichever term you want to use, and eventually became a block producer on the EOS network, helped launch that chain with EOS Stack, which is a decentralized autonomous community or decentralized autonomous company, corporation, organization, DAO. You and I both share that passion for different governance models that are nonviolent and completely voluntary. So I've been involved in a lot of different projects that are trying to, just like you said, add utility, whether it's blogging or new company structures for governance. And then with the rise of DeFi and NFTs and all these things, there's a lot of utility potential. But if it's all super complicated and difficult, no one can understand how to use it, then what's the point? And so that is why I've been for the last year and a half the managing director for the Foundation for Interwallet Operability, where I became a nonprofit that is focused on human readable addresses, the ability to send a payment request in a decentralized self-sovereign way, and to include a memo about that transaction. So exactly like you said, trying to make crypto as easy as PayPal, Venmo, your banking app, any kind of centralized experience today, is able to offer a user experience that most crypto platforms can't offer. And we're bringing a solution that's just simple and usable. My crypto address is just Luke@Stokes. That's it. And that's also a key exchange. So if someone goes to my Twitter and they say, oh, Luke@Stokes, if they ever get a payment request from me, they'll know it's from me and not someone else with a man-in-the-middle attack pretending to be me. Or if they want to send me a payment, they know they can do that confidently without a test send and like, did you get it? All that. It's just Luke@Stokes. So I'm excited about the project and the protocol. We've come a long way. We launched about a year ago. And, we've already got, I think, about 18 different wallets and exchanges as of this moment that have integrated the protocol. So you can do like sends and receives and stuff. But it's, I agree with you. It's a really important. This is an incredible tool for freedom. This is an incredible tool to help humanity level up. And yet it's just really difficult. So it's hard enough to even get your head around what is money and what is this Bitcoin crypto thing? It doesn't make sense. Where's the value? What backs it? Getting people over that hump is often the most difficult part. But then once they get it and like, oh, I get it. Fiat currency and inflation, that's theft, just like taxes. Like, okay, I get it. And they start moving into this new paradigm. But then they try to use it and they're like, what? This is too damn hard to use. What are you talking about? No one's going to accept this. So we got to fix that problem too, make this utility more easy and joyful to use.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, well, we want to undermine the Federal Reserve System and create this whole new ecology or ecosystem for transferring and providing value to people. But if there's not, as my good buddy Ernest Hancock says, a grandma just button where grandma can just press the button and it works, then are people actually going to adopt it? Typically, people don't get involved in new technologies until closer to the end of the curve. And then when they do get involved, they want it to be very easy to use. They want to make sure that the use case and the value that it adds to them is very obvious. So my question is with obviously FIO, that's interoperability is a key phrase there, right? So the whole idea behind the protocol you're working with is that it's going to work with a multitude of different blockchains or cryptocurrencies. So I guess I'm curious if you'll dive deeper into that for me and express how easy that is to actually implement. Like if I want my address to be Sterlin Lujan and somebody just sends Sterlin Lujan some Bitcoin, and by the way, anyone who wants to do that, please do. And maybe we can figure out how Luke can let us know how to do it using FIO protocol.
Yeah, definitely. And there's kind of three things that I've found as I'm talking about this that are the most confusing to understand in the beginning. So first off, it's a usability layer. You can think of it as a layer 2 for those who are familiar with that terminology, a usability layer for sending and receiving crypto. So it doesn't actually integrate directly with any blockchain at all. It's a usability layer at the wallet layer. So the wallet, whether that's a wallet in an exchange or a DeFi platform or your actual wallet like on your phone, that's where the integration takes place. So for example, if you're going to send a Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash or whatever it might be, it's going to do a lookup on that blockchain and grab that native public blockchain address, the big long crazy thing that you don't want to deal with. And then it's going to send the cryptocurrency under the hood, behind the scenes, just like it always does. So the FIO protocol is not in any way related to your native blockchain transaction. That happens just like it always does. That blockchain doesn't even need to know or care whether or not FIO exists. It's a layer above that in the wallet experience to create that experience. So one, it's its own blockchain. So it is, even though it's a layer 2 in terms of the user experience, it is a standalone blockchain. So you can trust the Byzantine fault tolerant security of that network. There's over 35 block producers in 20 different countries. They're token elected through delegated proof of stake. And they secure the network. You can also, it's fully voluntary. Anyone can run their own node. So if you don't trust a node from the block producer, for example, you can run your own node and validate the data that you're getting there. And also, too, it's important to notice that the actual FIO address itself, in the case of Luke@Stokes, is an NFT. And by that, I mean it's a non-fungible token. And only the person with the private key that controls that token has the ability to use it. And what I mean by use it is map a Bitcoin address or send a FIO request, which is a request for payment. And in that request, you can include a memo or like an order, invoice card, something like that. And so that's important to notice as well, in that just like you can trust your blockchain account to be yours and only yours because you control that private key in the public private key setup, you can trust that if you get a FIO request from someone or you're going to send cryptocurrency to someone with a FIO address, they are the only recipients of that. They're the only one that could have mapped that native blockchain public address, or they're the only one that could have sent that FIO request because they control that private key. So those are kind of the important concepts, that it doesn't touch your native transaction. Those happen just like always. The NFT itself, it's actually made of two parts too. There's a domain part, which is kind of cool because I own the Stokes domain as well, and I've kept it. You can either have it public or private. So mine is private. So only because I'm the key holder of that domain, I'm the only one that can create addresses on that domain. So for example, if you're an exchange and you have to go through some type of KYC process, you could ensure that anyone with an at your domain at your exchange is a KYC member because you're the one that controls whether or not they can have that VO address. In addition to, there are some other like wallet naming solution providers. I'm sure you've heard of ENS, Unstoppable Domains, and PayString and other things like that. Many of them are focused on doing decentralized DNS, which is really important. It's a project I'm really excited about. I think it needs to happen. But unfortunately, from our perspective, DNS is plain text. It's like, it has to be public due to the nature of how DNS works. Whereas wallet naming, we feel, should be as private as possible. So we kind of have two different approaches. We're all about usability, being able to request payments and things of that nature. And the FIO request is actually an encrypted message between the two parties. So it uses those FIO addresses, and when you send that request, it uses a Diffie-Hellman shared key, encrypts that message, and that includes the token code, the chain code, the amount, and that memo, like a note about what it's for. And that's, I think, really important as well, as we see a lot of tokens becoming more interoperable on multiple chains. Like Tether, for example, exists on Binance Smart Chain, Ethereum, OmniLayer, EOS. It's all over the place now. And it's very, very easy to send a token to the wrong chain even now. And so by using FIO requests and the way that FIO works, by mapping that chain code and the token code, you can ensure your interaction is going to go to the right place, to the right person.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because one of the things we've had to do at Cryptospace is, through an offshoot of our business model, is offer the ability to retrieve funds that someone had sent to the wrong address, which is still very common, and especially with some of the stable coins, right? I mean, you mentioned Tether, USDT. We've had an issue where someone sent to the wrong chain, and then we had to figure out a way to technologically retrieve that. And sometimes it's just not worth retrieval because it does take some resources and some time, the access to the private key, the whole 9 yards to get a hold of that. And some people just lose their money if it's a smaller amount indefinitely. So that's cool that you guys... Go ahead.
Had this situation. So we partner with a lot of different wallets and exchanges. So for example, we've got the Whitebit exchange, we've got Liquid Global Exchange, and Ascendex, which used to be BitMax. All three of those exchanges have integrated the FIO protocol. In my conversations with the CEO, Seth, at Liquid Global, for example, they have had, just an astounding number of funds have been lost. And when he talks about how the recovery process in some case would take some of their lead engineers like 5 hours, and that means whatever sprint they had that week that they were trying to get done is broken. They're not going to meet their sprint because they, like you said, have to have high level access to the private key system to be able to retrieve and extract those funds that were incorrectly sent. And I've just heard story after story after story, just heartbreaking stories. There was one story, and I did an interview with Seth where he talked about a story of someone had spent all their money on this land, and it was just... I won't even go into it because it's so discouraging. Like the people that have bought properties and done major transactions with crypto, and they sent to an exchange or to a wallet address, and they had certain characters off, or they sent it to the wrong account, and there's just no way to recover it. And again, I think we have to make this easier to use if we're ever going to reach adoption. And unfortunately, I think people are going to gravitate towards easy. You said it well. I think Steve Jobs kind of schooled the whole computer industry when he came in and said, just get rid of all this jargon, give it one button. Your computers and your technology should be easy and simple. It should be for the creatives to be able to do cool stuff. And so I think we're in a similar stage with cryptocurrency. Like when you look at the adoption of the internet and the law of diffusion of innovation, people adopting it at this exponential curve. It was the hypertext transfer protocol that came out, HTTP, and that gave us the World Wide Web and web browsers. Once that happened, after like 10 plus years, there's this huge spike in adoption. I feel like we're in the same place. The FIO protocol now exists for crypto after 10, 12 years. And we're at this moment of a doublings where if you follow the same curve, what took about 7 years from where we're at now for the internet to get to 1 billion users, some are saying is going to take about 4 years. So it's like 3 to 5 years. We're potentially going to have a tremendous number of people coming to cryptocurrency. And in the kind of, as you mentioned, the curve of the adoption curve, we're kind of in the innovators, like 2-3% right now. And the early adopters, the 12.5%, they can't put up with the same stuff the innovators put up with. They want a little more, it's got to be a little easier, make a little more sense. And so my concern is if we don't make it easy, you're going to have people going right to central bank digital currencies. They're going to say, hey, we get it, fiat's broken, we can't use this anymore, hyperinflation's killing us. Let's look at this crypto thing. Oh man, the fees are too high, it's too difficult to transact, it's too confusing. Oh, well, here's this other thing. It's a digital currency, it works like crypto, right? It's just the same, but it's easier. Yeah, let's use that. And they don't realize they're giving up their self-sovereign control if they don't own the private key to an actual blockchain as opposed to a digital currency.
Yeah, that's a great point, Luke. And it reminds me of also why so many people are still reliant on traditional exchanges or custodian based exchanges. It's because that's what they're used to. It's what makes people feel comfortable. They still feel comfortable to keep their money with a bank or a quasi bank, which is basically what all the exchanges have been acting as right now. And that's largely a result of us not having innovated far enough to make this easy to use for as many people as possible. So one of the things we've had to do at the crypto space is develop educational protocols and training to train people how to manage their own private keys and to manage their own wallets. And it all goes into what you guys are doing, making it easy to send and receive funds, to not need to have a panic attack just to press a button and send $100 to your grandmother, to your friend, to your brother, to your business associate, whoever it is. And that's currently the way it still stands. But it sounds like what you guys are doing at FIO is you're completely solving that problem, and you're acting as part of this exponential growth curve, right? As soon as we have more protocols like what you guys are creating and what other people in the space have also looked into solving, problems that they're solving, is going to create that basically open the floodgates to allow more people to come into the space and to adopt cryptocurrency without having to fear that they're going to lose their funds or money. I think one of the big issues also is people just get used to having others custodian their funds, right? They're used to it because it's how society has functioned. In a way, it is a vestigial organ, right, of society. It's what people are, because they're used to it. It doesn't evolve anymore, and they just keep doing that, even though it's going to potentially have problems in the long run, right? Eventually, an appendix could burst, and money could be the appendix.
I remember Mt. Gox. I have friends of mine that lost 10 Bitcoin on Mt. Gox, like all the way back to, I remember a while back, I got a new phone and I was going through and I was replacing, all the different Google Authenticator logins I had for all these different exchanges. And it was hilarious going through this to be like, that exchange is gone. That one got hacked. That one's not around anymore. Like just remembering all the stories of all these centralized exchanges. And it really is the very point of cryptocurrency, is that you have self-sovereign control of your own value. And it does require a leveling up. Humanity has to kind of take personal responsibility to a new level to say, you know what? I can own and control and store my own value. And there are things like social key recovery, and there's other things that we're working on, many people are working on, so that you can have a backup process. We have many great wallets that are part of our ecosystem, such as Infinito, Mycelium, Koinomi, Garda, Midas Protocol, Shapeshift, Edge Wallet, and the Edge Wallet, for example, they've got a full recovery system where they encrypt that information with your password and they'll store it for you. They can't access it, but if you lose your phone or your phone gets destroyed, you can restore your accounts and your seed phrases and all your crypto. And so things like that I think are really important to give people confidence. And also too, like just making it easier. So I tell people there's kind of two pieces to it. One, you got to level up. There's just the analogy I like to use is the first time you drove a car, you were freaking out. You're just like, oh my gosh, white knuckling all the way. You're the student driver and you're just like, this is so crazy. And now it's like, oh my gosh, I've been driving for decades. I don't even think about it, right? And that's really kind of how using crypto can be. It's like super, super stressful, but eventually you get used to it. But it's still not that great. So that's where it's like, I agree with you. I've been in it 8.5 years. I have a computer science degree. I'm a fairly technical guy. I still make mistakes. I made a mistake just a few months ago. I literally, you have to whitelist a certain address on a centralized exchange before you can withdraw from it. And I was going through that process. And I just, whitelisted it quickly, went over to the other screen, copy and pasted it, and boom, and sent. And I didn't go slow enough to recognize I copied and pasted a whitelisted Bitcoin address from 2017. And it wasn't one that I even knew where it was. I'm like, what the heck? I just lost my deposit. Thankfully, I have a spreadsheet. I normally keep track of all my transactions. It wasn't on there either. I'm like, when did I ever withdraw to an address that I don't control? Why would I have ever done that? Long story short, I dug through my email and I ended up figuring out that I had done a favor for someone to transfer some funds to them. And they still had access to the account. So I ended up getting my funds back, but I was just like, oh my gosh, this is why this exchange needs the FIO protocol. Because I could have just sent hey, here, send me a FIO request, show up right on my phone, and I can just pick it out and say, yeah, that's me. I'll gladly, take that deposit. So these are the type of things that we got to do to level up on one side and make it easy on the other.
Yeah, so a question, and this is for anybody who runs an exchange. I help run an exchange, and there's other people who are going to be watching these videos that run an exchange. How hard is it to reach out to you guys and say, hey, we want to be able to provide FIO protocol functionality to our user base? How challenging of a proposition would that be for you if someone came up to you and asked you that?
We try to make it as simple as possible. So first of all, it is a completely open source network. All the code is available, all the developer documents, everything. You could do the entire thing without ever talking to us, without any permission needed from us or anyone. So that is one part of it. The second part of it is the foundation, when the chain was launched, the nonprofit Cayman entity was allocated a large number of tokens for this specific purpose. So we actually can give up to, according to our current kind of approach to the grant process, about $50,000 for wallets and exchanges in FIO tokens that want to integrate the protocol. So we want to help with that development effort. And now, as far as the work involved, it is a number of man hours, depending on how much you're focused on. It could be anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks, depending on the development effort and what level of integration that you want to go with. We've seen it done sooner, we've seen it done later. But it's around that a number of man hours. And in the knowledge base, I could send you more information that we have it broken down to, this is what a FIO send is. That's like a day worth of work. We could just do a simple lookup, who's Luke at Stokes for Bitcoin, that kind of thing. And then you get a little further to doing FIO requests, FIO data, being able to register your own FIO address or register a custom domain if you wanted to do that. And so there's, further details in the integration as well. But absolutely, we would love to talk to anyone who cares as we do about making crypto easier to use. We do think that this is a way to do it. And we have, unlike a lot of the other solutions, we have a decentralized business model, which actually provides value to those who integrate it. So the way the tokenomics model works is essentially as the fees are paid on chain to register a FIO address or a FIO domain, those fees are distributed to the block producers. They're distributed a small portion to the foundation to continue developing the protocol. And the other portion goes to what we call the TPID, the Technology Provider ID. So if you're a wallet or you're an exchange and you've facilitated that transaction to register a user, as it stands today, you can get a dollar worth of FIO tokens for every user that pays $2 a year to register that FIO address. Or if they get a FIO domain, which is around $40 a year today, you can get half of that, $20 in FIO tokens. So it's a really great economic model to incentivize people to do the integration, because we know it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to support an ongoing integration. It's not just like I built it and then I can walk away. You have to have some development effort to keep that protocol updated as we continue to make changes. And it's just like any technological integration. So we built into the model a decentralized business model. So there's no central company sitting there, collecting fees going, yeah, we want to integrate, come integrate the protocol so we can make a bunch of money. It's actually designed so that if we get over the network effect and we're all using this protocol, then we all make money. It's a pretty exciting way to do it.
Yeah, that's amazing. So effectively, you've gamified it with this market incentive model. And it seems like a lot of DeFi or decentralized companies or elements in the space are moving toward this model. It makes sense, right? I think it's an amazing way to go, an amazing trajectory. Great stuff. So this begs a question in my mind, at least. You've been in this arena, right? Which on the surface seems pretty simple, but obviously there's some complicated moving pieces to this on a technological side. So I'm curious, what are your curiosities right now? What are you looking into? What problems are you trying to solve? Where is your research going in the space right now? And it can obviously have to do with FIO or any other thing that you've been currently thinking about. I'm curious where your mind is.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that stuff. For a number of years, it's definitely been in governance, DAX and DAOs, like I mentioned, being a block producer on multiple different chains. Obviously, as the managing director for a chain as well, kind of how can I help with the governance model of how are these resources protected and valued. So I've been helping enable people to build DAX and DAOs. I'm still passionate about that, but lately my focus has been more so on a couple of concepts that just keep coming up no matter what. One is identity. How are we going to do decentralized self-sovereign identity? It's very, very important that we do that right, or it's going to be very bad for our species. You could think about what happened, with like the Chinese social credit system, or what happened even, I'm reminded of this often, what happened with the Holocaust even, where IBM's technology was used to basically number human beings and destroy them. And it's a very huge responsibility as a technologist to introduce these technologies in the world. And it's important, I think, that we take responsibility for how they might be used. A brick can be used to create a house or break a window. It's just a technology piece. But as we introduce it and as we put protections around it to hopefully help people use it in the right way, I think that's really important. So self-sovereign identity, and there's different projects related to that. At some point, we would like to have verified FIO addresses. So I'm Luke at Stokes, but you just have to believe me because I told you. It would be nice to have, other organizations that could come in and verify someone's identity without having to do kind of the government approach of KYC and, full invasion of privacy and all that. Another thing I'm really interested about, and it relates to the governance as well, is I've been part of the part of the EOS community since the launch of the chain, and there's something that Dan Larimer is doing right now called Eden on EOS, and it's a fascinating model. I've read his book called More Equal Animals, and it kind of touches on this idea of a political playoff system. So essentially, imagine you have 1,000 people that are all together, and they get randomized into groups of 10, and they go on a Zoom call for 50 minutes in those groups of 10 and say, hey, here's a project I'd like to get funded for with this community treasury. And then they kind of discuss it and debate it, and they figure out, who's going to represent us out of this group. And they kind of figure it out there in real time. There's no opportunity for lobbying. There's no opportunity for, bribes or anything like that, because the entire video is recorded and converted into an NFT. So everything is fully transparent. Everyone's reputation is on the line. And the only people that can even be part of the group to participate in that political playoff have to be invited. So it's all voluntary. You can leave at any time, but you have to be invited by a community member, and you have to agree to what's called the peace treaty. So he has this really interesting idea that kind of talks through a group of people with a shared goal, how they can create a structure of governance. And as you and I believe, we've been labeled voluntarists or anarchists or these different titles, those who are generally not a fan of hierarchies, right? Or any type of authoritarian structures or control. But I've also come to realize, you see hierarchies throughout nature, and there's actually a mechanism of organization that can be super efficient. The part I reject mostly is the violent aspect of nation-state governments and how they use hierarchies. And this is a very interesting exploration of voluntary hierarchies. So you can have people through this political playoff system only inviting people they trust and putting their reputation on the line. Like, for example, this weekend, I invited a couple people, and we do like a 1-minute ceremony where it says, hey, have you read the peace treaty? Okay, you have. Here's this person who's part of the community. He's on the call too. Do you believe he's read it and he's going to vouch for it? And you do vouch for him? And it's like, yes, yes, yes. And they record that as a little NFT as well. And everyone who was on that call gets a copy of that NFT, and one goes up for auction to support the community. So it's kind of a neat idea to basically say, I can know who invited who into this community, and I can know if I trust them. There's a little bit of a social, social trust that goes on there, a web of trust of sorts. And then with this political playoff system, it's similar to what they did in Greece and Athens, where they have a randomization component to the election process. So once they're randomized into that group, they do the first round of elections, then it goes to 100 people. Do another round of elections, goes to one group of 10 people, and they do a final election. They call it the Satoshi, whoever's on the top. And that group that elected them becomes the board. So it's this really fascinating way to kind of glean the wisdom of the crowds from a large group of people to get representatives that will represent the people according to their own choice. And I'm pretty excited about it, the potential for it to even change how we do politics. And that's something I've been playing around with. And the interesting idea too is it's also Sybil attack resistant, because each person that's part of that community was on a video call live, as part of their initiation process. So I've actually started issuing FIO addresses to all the members. I think there's 37 members so far. We're just getting started. And so I have the Eden domain. So I have like Luke Stokes at Eden and the other members that are participating. So I'm very excited about seeing blockchain technology being used for different ways to organize humans, make them more efficient, more effective, less violent, more voluntary, that kind of stuff. I just get all excited about.
Oh man, that's amazing. I'd actually never heard or looked into the Eden protocol on EOS. That sounds amazing. What it reminded me of is some years ago, really before blockchain technology took off and got popular, probably even before that, an economist by the name of Robin Hanson came up with this idea called futarchy. Futarchy was effectively this way of leveraging prediction markets to incentivize people to vote for different criteria or different items that are going to happen in society. And how it would work in Hanson's model is that people would put their money where their vote is, right? Put their money where their mouth is. They would vote on different kinds of potential solutions to problems. And then all of the votes in funds would get tallied up, and then there would be a decision based on those votes if certain criteria or measures would be implemented in society based on the futarchy model. What this sounds like is an even more in-depth and even more fair version of that, with the randomization of randomizing the people and then putting it all together so we can find out, what those measures are going to be put forward in society. That's interesting. I'm going to have to look more into that myself. Great sharing that. And of course, I'm with you, brother. I've for the longest time wanted to find any kind of measure I can to create more nonviolent, peaceful, non-coercive, and voluntary societies. And I've always known that blockchain would provide an impetus for that if we built the projects out in the way they needed to be built, and then they could be put into use in society at large. And I think that's absolutely amazing. I'll keep supporting those kind of projects as we move forward. Great stuff, Luke. So governance in general. Let's talk just a bit more about this before we start closing up. Governance. Will you explain what governance is itself, so the audience can kind of get an idea, wrap their head around that notion?
Sure. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because I can remember at an Anarcho-Poco conference, actually, I mentioned governance. I was in a Seasteading Institute little meeting, and we were exploring some concepts of governance. And I remember one of the members there was like, "Oh, I can't use that word at all. It's too close to government." And they couldn't make a distinction between government, which I think of as a monopoly on the initiation of force in a geographic region as far as the nation state is concerned.
Right, the Rothbardian definition.
Yeah, and governance, which to me is essentially a mechanism to say, okay, if you've got a group of people and you've got a shared goal and they want to accomplish something, and they recognize there are boundaries to what's appropriate and not appropriate within their community, within their tribe, and how are they going to govern the process of saying, here's what's in bounds and here's what's out of bounds? And as much as possible, I want to see that governed by systems that are basically autonomous, and that's where the blockchain is so interesting, because it uses economic incentives, like you were describing with the feudocracy, economic incentives to make sure that the good actors make so much more money than a bad actor attempting to scam the system. They destroy their own value if they try. And so I'm really excited about models that basically align the selfish interest of the individual with the interests of the whole community. And so when I talk about governance, that's kind of what I think about, is building systems that align the individual and the community to essentially come to a Nash equilibrium, come to a mechanism to like solve the coordination problem, to come to a perspective where no one would change their vote or change their decision on something, because they're all benefiting in a maximal way, in the best possible way, the best possible outcome. And that's, I think, what we're going for. I know it may sound a little utopian to people who aren't familiar with this space, but it's what I've been living for many, many years. These blockchains work. There's tremendous value behind them, and they work because of these models of governance. Or you might have heard the term a consensus algorithm. For example, Bitcoin uses proof of work. The chains I've been mentioning today use delegated proof of stake. There's also proof of stake. There are other consensus algorithms that are coming up as well. But ultimately, I like to boil it all down to, so those are layer one algorithms, and you'll hear layer two scaling solutions as well. But there's actually a layer zero, which is the one I think is most fascinating to talk about. Layer zero is it's the community. It's the number of people who actually believe that what you're doing is valuable. And as we saw with projects like Steam that kind of got Sybil attacked and taken over by some various actors, Layer Zero said, well, we're just going to move. And they voluntarily took their token balances and they started the Hive community, and it's been thriving. So it's a really interesting way to think about these governance models, is essentially how do you come to a level of consensus within the group where the group's identity is maintained? And as soon as it's, that's lost, as soon as people don't agree at a high enough layer, then you get the fractalization of the community. And that can happen too. And that can be a healthy thing as well, because it allows people to go the direction they'd like to go. As long as there's voluntary association, everyone can do well. But that's when I think of governance. It's like, how do humans get along? How do we build systems so that they're going to be incentivized to do not just what's best for them at the detriment of someone else, but what's best for them that also benefits somebody else. And that's what I get really excited about.
Yeah, man, I'm right there with you, Luke. Yeah, my whole idea is that governance is just how we can organize toward voluntary cooperation and where we have the ability to opt in and opt out of different systems. Whereas government is just like you said, it's a monopoly over the initiation of force over a geographical region, right? Where you can't opt in and opt out. And if you do that, people with guns will literally come after you and try to hurt you. But we want to we're using governance models in blockchain right now to create societal organization, for lack of a better term, that is nonviolent and that can be figured out by people casting various kinds of votes or gaining consensus within the network. And that's one of the reasons why I've been involved in crypto and blockchain for a good while as well, because it's an amazing solution to these, very viable solution to these problems.
So maybe we should just jump into that a little bit. Like if you've made it this far into the video, you might have heard a lot of jargon where you're like, what is all this stuff anyway? Blockchain, crypto, I don't even know what this is, but hey, it sounds cool. I want less violence, sure. And so I think it's probably helpful to, for kind of those who haven't been in the space for a long time, it's like, what exactly is crypto? And I think I sent you an article earlier today that I had written, and if you could read that and that could help, but it's the idea of essentially helping people recognize it's like a spreadsheet. Enough people have used Google Drive or Google Docs where they kind of have this idea of there's a document that lives on the internet and anyone can make a change to it, and everyone else who's like looking at the document at the same time, they see that change. And a spreadsheet, spreadsheet's a little bit of a technical concept, but enough people are starting to be familiar with spreadsheets. They're using it in their businesses, they're using it in their taxes and stuff, organizing their data. And that's essentially the way I like to explain what a blockchain is and what cryptocurrency is. It's like a global spreadsheet, these rows of big, long, crazy hashes. That's the Bitcoin address, which we're trying to make easier with FIO protocol. And then next to that address is a number of tokens. And the only person who can transfer those tokens is the person who has the password, basically, the key to access that row in the spreadsheet. If you can imagine that spreadsheet's locked per row. And I think that's a helpful mechanism for people to understand, okay, so I've got something there and it's mine, no one else can mess with it, and it's scarce and it's in demand, so it becomes valuable. And so then again, people say, well, how does that ever become valuable? Where does the value come from? And I like to share how pretty much money is just shared storytelling. It's a group of people came up with, I almost say shared delusions. It's just whatever we agreed to call valuable was valuable. And you can see this throughout human history, whether it's, rocks with holes in them or shells or tally sticks or, pieces of paper with dead white people on them, that we use as money. And so this idea that like anything can be valuable if humans believe it's valuable. So we have this idea of this entry in a ledger that has become scarce and rivalrous. So it's become this valuable thing that people want to have access to. And your private key gives you access to that. And so when people think, oh, okay, so I kind of get what the blockchain is, I kind of get it's this database of storing this, and there's certain people that get financially rewarded for securing that database so no one can come in and break it or hack it, and it's not controlled by anyone, it's decentralized, distributed, that's cool, that makes sense. And some people go, okay, but why do we need the cryptocurrency part? Let's just use the technology, just the database is cool, right? And I try to help people understand that without a valuable cryptocurrency, the blockchain technology itself is not very useful. One of its key features is immutability, meaning once an entry is put on the spreadsheet, it can never be removed. It's a permanent record. And that's done by those who secure the network. So as soon as an entry, such as I transfer my tokens to you, there's no way I can then go transfer them to someone else real quick and do what's called a double spend. It's like it only has one entry. Once those tokens are not controlled by me, they're controlled by you. It's like I can give you an apple and it's very clear. People say, oh, you have the physical apple now. But if I give you a picture of an apple, how can you know that someone else didn't get a copy of the same picture at the exact same time? How can you know that that picture is actually the one and only that you now own? So it's very difficult to do with digital technology. And this is what the cryptocurrency solves, because it's a reward given to those blockchain validators, those miners as they're called, who secure that ledger. If they don't have a valuable cryptocurrency as a reward for the work they're doing, then that ledger doesn't become very valuable. And we've actually seen situations where the blockchain technology might be good, but it gets attacked. 51% attack is where enough of the miners kind of are not securing the network and others can come in and attack it and multiple spend the currency, which obviously breaks the trust in the system and it's no longer valuable. And that's, thankfully larger chains like Ethereum and Bitcoin are incredibly secure because of the number of miners that are securing the network. And the same thing with EOS and Hive and FIO with delegated proof of stake, there's a lot of value in the tokens that are needed to elect those block producers, those validators. So there's a lot of different mechanisms for consensus, a lot of explorations of it all. But that's kind of basically what a blockchain is. It's this shared spreadsheet where only the people that have access to with the right key, the right password, can send the tokens to others that they control.
Yeah, that's probably one of the best explanations of blockchain technology that I've heard. A lot of people get lost in the weeds of a ledger or a database, and then they try to combine that explanation in with mining, and then it becomes very jargon laden and it's very difficult for people to comprehend that. But I really like your simple discussion that it's a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet is effectively locked until we unlock it with a key, and that's where your private keys lie, and that's how you can send and receive cryptocurrency and keep that. Cool. I think we're at the end of the road here, Luke. We talked about a lot of very important things, and I really love what you had to say about FIO and what you're doing in regards to governance and helping spread models of voluntarism freedom. That's very important and close to my heart, and I know that a lot of viewers it's going to be as well. So as we finish up here, I just want you to, if there's anything that you want to share for the audience, go ahead and share that, or if there any place where they can find your material, that would probably be helpful as well, brother, as we conclude.
Excellent. And thank you so much for having me, Sterlin. It's always great to hang out with you and chat and catch up with things. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Stokes. You can find me on Hive at Luke Stokes. And Hive, it can be peakt.com, it can be econsea.com, it can be hive.blog. There's a lot of interfaces for the Hive blockchain, but I'm Luke Stokes on all of those. And you can find us about the FIO protocol at fioprotocol.io, the fioprotocol.io. And we're also at Join FIO on Twitter. We'd love to hear from you. We've got a great community in our Discord as well. And again, if you're an exchange or a wallet or anyone building a crypto-enabled product and you care about usability, we'd really love to hear from you, really love to help you integrate the FIO protocol, and we'd love to give you financial incentives to do so. So please reach out to us. We'd love to contact you. And thanks again for the time. I appreciate it.
Luke, thank you for your time, brother. Very excellent. Thanks.